right, hi all and welcome to the presentation about Mars, and thank you for tuning in to Scuba.Digital and UE for this presentation. I hope you can all hear me well, and my intention today is to take you back into something that was quite important for me and my friends 10 years ago. I'm going to take you on a history journey first, so you can understand what we were trying to achieve when we went looking for wrecks out on the Baltic Sea. First, a little bit about myself then. I'm Richard Lundgren, and I'm from Sweden. I spent most of my days exploring the underwater world. I shoot a lot of video. I'm been happy to work with some of the biggest broadcasting companies around in the world, National Geographic and Nova and so on. I also have an expertise in 3D photogrammetry, surveying underwater, ROV piloting and stuff like that. But most and foremost, I'm an adventurer. I like to have adventures. And that's basically what drew me into diving to begin with. If you want to learn more about what I'm going to talk about, because I only have 30 minutes, please visit the Explorers Club, and you can look at the Explorers Club flag report 215 that you can download and read lots about Mars and so on. You can also visit our website, www.marsproject.org. And you can also tune in if you live in Europe now. You can see National Geographic Strain the Viking Seas, episode 2, if you want to see more about Mars also. But let's go into history. And I'm going to take you back, what is it now, 550 years back in time, basically, during the Reformation of Europe. And if you look at this image here, you see a map of Scandinavia. And we were Catholic states at the beginning, but then we turned into Protestantism and so on. And that actually created lots of conflicts between different city-states and countries. This was the time during early state formation, so there were not many countries as you know them today. There were more city-states and so on. And the Libyc state, city-state, the Hanseatic League was very powerful in the Baltic Sea. They governed basically all trade and you know, anything that was shipped on the ocean and so on. So they were very powerful. You also had the German Order in Poland and so on. That was major players when it came to powers. Sweden had just been born as a country. Gustav Vasa was one of our first kings, and his son Erik XIV grew up as a Machiavellian prince, basically. He had these ideas on how to govern the country and how to build a superpower with kind of not so many means, but he still wanted to create Sweden and turn it into a superpower of its time. Sadly, he had competition because in Denmark there was another king or another prince, Frederick, that also had similar ambitions. And this led to big confrontations between the two. And since sea trade and trade overall was so important to these countries, a conflict was almost unavoidable as it were. And this is what this presentation is going to be all about, the remains of that sea battle that occurred 546 years ago. And many things led up to these escalations of sea powers. Sweden was growing quite quickly, and we started to build a purposely built armada of warships. This was uncommon back then during these times. Usually you took trading ships and armed them up a little bit with some cannons and so on and reinforced them, and then they had to do as a warship. Sweden started to purposely build warships. That was kind of unique at this time. They also put a lot of cannons on them as an experiment, just to see how that would work. Earlier on, you know, you had seen field cannons on field battlefields and so on, had tremendous firepower. So why not test them on boats also? So Sweden was quite big. We had a big armada, 37 ships when war broke up between Denmark and Sweden. Denmark, they were smart, so they created an alliance between Denmark then and the free city of Lübeck. So they gathered quite a lot of ships also, 33 ships as it were, when they sailed out to have this epic battle on the Baltic Sea. Sweden has had less soldiers on board compared to the Danish and Lübeck combined, but we had more cannons on board. So we had a little bit of a new tactic. We're going to look at a quick video here and see what happened.
Eric XIV had a new idea about how to fight at sea. Up to this time, battles were mainly fought through boarding and fighting on deck. From now on, he decided to let the guns do the job from a distance. He ordered his new ship to have more cannons on board than any other ship before. Eric's vision that large, stable ships could carry more artillery would change the rules of engagement at sea.
The war for which Mars was built and in which it sank was the first really in history to be decided by gunnery. And so in that sense, it's breaking very new ground. This recurring idea of the great ship that embodies the king's prestige, that embodies the power of the nation, at the same time that it tries to concentrate as much firepower into one platform. That's really what a whole chain of events that Mars set off in the 1560s.
King Eric XIV is obsessed with the idea of creating an empire. The key to realizing his ambition is the largest fleet in the world, with Mars as the admiral's flagship. With 5 decks, 2 just for gunnery, she is the crowning glory of Eric's fleet. In May 1564, a combined fleet from Lübeck and Denmark sails toward the Swedish coast. The 2 large fleets meet northwest of the island of Öland. This is where the interests of the warring sides collide. Power over the Baltic Sea is at stake. Eric's new tactics were actually written down in a document discovered by historian Ingvar Sjöblom. It is a direct order from the king to Admiral Jakob Bagge, commander of the Swedish Navy.
This is the instructions sent to Jakob Bagge on May 18th, 1564.
The king's orders to his admiral are direct and brutal. Attack the enemy ships as fiercely as possible. Sink them with gunshots and break them to pieces. Less than 2 weeks later, the enemies meet. Sveider Hoyer, the chaplain from Lübeck, is on board the opposing admiral's ship when the Swedish fleet arrives.
The ship they called Mars, Makalös, cast a somber shadow over our whole fleet, and from inside this evil shadow came cannonballs and flames, as if the gates of hell had opened before us.
Contemporary reports on both sides record that King Eric's new tactics were successful, and one of Lübeck's largest ships, the Long Bark, was reportedly sunk by a gunshot. If so, this is the first recorded example of a ship being sunk by artillery in a naval battle, a tipping point in the history of naval warfare.
So that takes you into this naval battle that was quite fierce. There are many stories about this battle, and you can read about it in history books and so on. And we are in Sweden, we're still being taught about this battle in school and so on. So it must have left quite a mark in history, as it were. It was an equal battle to begin with. On the first day of battle, the Swedes were actually victorious because we were able to sink an admiral ship on the opposing side. We don't know if that happened by chance, because usually you didn't sink each other during this time of warfare. It was much better to board other ships, because then you could claim the ship and then you didn't have to build a new one, did you? So that would have been quite smart. We think that Mars opened up with a massive amount of cannons and simply sank her, and we think both sides were equally surprised when that happened. As the day grew into night, and evening and night, both of the armadas actually separated, and this is where the fate of the Swedish armada turns bad. The wind started to blow and it turned into a storm. The Swedish sailors seems to have been a little bit less experienced handling bad weather and so on, because soon Mars found itself quite alone, facing off with the big remaining armada from the Danish and Swedish. We don't know if it was Swedish or not, but Jakob Bagge, the admiral on the Swedish ship, he didn't back down, so he attacked the big the opposing armada, even if he was virtually alone. A fierce battle started. Must have been totally brutal. Mars was painted white, according to history books, but they also said that her hull was more red than white because of all of the blood that went out from the gutters and so on. So it must have been quite fierce, this battle. Cannonballs, spears being thrown, even longbows being used. Must have been terrible. Muskets, smoke, fire, everything. As it happened, Mars got surrounded by the opposing ships, and she repelled several boarding attacks before the enemies actually were able to board her, and the Swedish crew on board surrendered. This is when it turns a little bit odd, because the opposing ships, they wanted to plunder Mars. She had a war treasure on board, and of course they wanted that war treasure. The intent was not to sink Mars, but she was on fire at this time. And all of a sudden, when they were trying to get to the war treasure, she exploded and sank. And she took almost 800 people with her down into the sea. And rumor has it, or legend has it rather, that from the fire and so on, and the smoke that came up from the red hot cannons on board when she sank and the cannon hit the water, a fume rose up in the front of the ship that took a ghostly shadow, and it looked like a ghost. And the ghost looked sadly up towards the north, towards Stockholm, the capital city of Sweden, and sighed and then was dispelled. And that's where Mars was sunk and the legend was started. And this is basically the background of the whole thing. So now we're going to come into me and my friends and what our connection to this wreck. And as it happens, I started to dive because my father, when I was very young, he took me up to the Vasa Ship Museum. Maybe I've heard about the Vasa ship. It's a fantastic 17th century ship. So younger ship than Mars and a little bit smaller. But she's recovered at the museum and she's totally intact. My father showed me that wreck. He was a commercial diver. And of course, as a 7-year-old kid, your eyes was big. And of course, you also wanted to find a shipwreck once, right? And to become like Tintin in Red Rackham's treasure magazines and so on. You also wanted to leave a mark in history. And that's to be true. That's why I started to dive to find shipwrecks. And around 15, 16, 17 years of age, me and my brothers and friends to us, very close friends, we started to search for shipwrecks. And of course, the big target was Mars. We wanted to find Mars more than anything in life, basically. And that started a 20-year-long adventure where we went out and searched every summer. We spent 2 to 3 months searching for shipwrecks. And we found a lot of wrecks, but we never found Mars. So, of course, people were making joke at us, and they said, why would you find Mars and so on if nobody else has ever found it? The Navy is searching for her. Professional treasure hunters is searching for her. I mean, she was one of the most famous ships that ever disappeared under the water, the biggest warship of its time, more than 100 bronze cannons and a war treasure. Who wouldn't like to find that one, right? Well, we kept on going, we kept on searching, and many people don't really ask what we found, if we found something else. But if you look at the image here to the right, you can see that we found a lot of wrecks while searching for Mars. We found, I think when we last did the count, I think we found 160 wrecks. I remember one day when we were out, we found 7 wrecks on one day. Totally crazy. You usually dream about finding 1 wreck in your whole lifetime, and here we were finding 7 in one day. That's not all positive, because I remember a couple of weeks later, we were out for 2 or 3 days and didn't find anything, and that almost turned into mutiny. Let's give this up. We don't find any wrecks anymore. So you get a little bit spoiled by this also. But of course, when you search for something for almost 20 years and you still can't find it, then you're ready to give up, right? And many people were interested and helped us in the beginning. So people came and went back and forth. In the very last year, it was only the core group. It was me, my brother, and Frederick that was still searching for this shipwreck. And we actually said that this is going to be absolutely the last year we are searching for this wreck. If we can't find it this year, we can't find it at all. And we decided to go back to square one, actually. We had searched so much, we decided to go back to square one and just say, to make sure that we hadn't missed anything. Because also remember that if you search for something for 20 years, technology, search equipment, survey equipment has changed over time, developed quite a bit. It's almost like when we started to search for shipwrecks, it was like having a black and white TV. Some of you might still remember those if you're old as me. And today you have 8K flat screen LCD or OLED TVs. Quite a bit of difference in evolution, right? Same thing with the side scan sonars and other toys we use to search for shipwrecks with. So when we came back to the original area where we thought that Mars would be with a high-end side scan sonar, top modern sonar, it didn't take long at all. We found Mars within 2 days, and this is an actual image when we found Mars in 2011. And on the side scan sonar image, she looked exactly as we had envisioned her to look like when we actually found her. And obviously, needless to say, the feelings we all had when we saw that sonar image come up on the screen was priceless, of course. Couldn't believe our eyes. We knew that this would be Mars. It could only be one other wreck, but that wreck was not as big as Mars. So we were pretty sure that this would be it. And to the right on this side of the image, you can see that side scan sonar image. And to the left, you can see that tow side scan that we used, the Klein 5000. So, of course, then it was time to go diving, right? If you have searched for something for 20 years and you think this is it, this is going to be Mars, then you're, of course, super, super excited as it is. And you can't wait to get into the water. Sadly, we had to wait for almost 2 weeks before we could go diving on Mars because we had a survey job that we had to go and do. So we had to go to the other end of the Baltic Sea to work for 2 weeks before we could get back. And I can tell you those 2 weeks were nervous because people knew that we were out searching for things. People were checking us on radar and on AES to see where we stopped and what we do. So we were, of course, scared that somebody would come and sneak dive Mars when we were away. And, of course, then take the whole thing for the discovery and so on. But after 2 weeks, we came back, and the first dive was super exciting, of course, but also such a big relief when you come down to the wreck site. And this is one of the first impressions we got. A massive hull wreck, a massive oak timbered hull wreck, massive in dimensions, cannons, bronze cannons protruding from gun porch. I could easily count 30 to 40 cannons while just swimming over Mars. So I know that this was a big capital warship at the right age and so on. Quite stunning and very hard to describe that sensation when you have searched for something for so many years, when you have searched for 20 odd years. I must say also that we are not any special people or absolutely not rich people. We put everything we had, all our savings and everything we earned during the whole year, we put into self-funding this exploration and this search for Mars. We didn't have any sponsors that believed in us or anything like that. If we had one characteristics, it was being foolhardy, not giving up. You know, we really wanted to find this wreck. Nothing else mattered almost. So that's the only characteristic that we had. When we started, we didn't even know what we did when we searched. And well, if you fail enough time, then you become an expert or something. So after 20 years, we can call us expert surveyors and so on, because we had to become that just to find Mars in it. Here you can see one of the bronze cannons that lays down there, and it's a perfect time capsule diving Mars. It's down at 75 meters, so 250 feet. It's cold down there. It's close to the freezing point, 2 to 3 degrees on the bottom. It's very little oxygen, and there is no sea worms, so all the woods and so on is perfectly conserved. And you can actually still smell fire when you dive on Mars. It's totally crazy, that feeling. It's totally dark down there, so the only light you have is what you bring with you. So it's quite hard to get this overview when you dive the wreck. You can only see what your light illuminates in front of you. So it's eerie, and you're humbled by the size of the wreck, but also the history that surrounds you, knowing that when you dive Mars, you're one of the very first persons that have entered this time capsule for 450 odd years and so on. To identify Mars, we looked at the cannons, and then we could see a typical identity. This is like a registration plate on Mars. To the top left here, we can see the Vasa. The king was a Vasa king. That was his family name. And you can see their coat of arms. So we know that that was a good sign. And then when we could see the signs here that you can see on the big image, we could use that to actually find that exact cannon in historical archives to see when it was founded by who made it, and when it was loaded onto Mars. So this is like finding the registration plate of the actual wreck. So after the discovery, then we of course went to the authorities and reported the discovery. And we got so much money as a reward from the state, so we bought Ferraris and stuff. No, just kidding. We didn't get any compensation whatsoever for finding Mars and one of the biggest war treasures ever discovered. That's not why we spent all of these years to do it anyhow. We did it because we wanted to find Mars and dive Mars. Nothing else mattered at this time. We had to report it so the wreck site could be protected. Within 2 hours, a new law was founded just to protect Mars, and it's the most protected wreck site in the Baltic Sea as we speak right now, and because of the historical value down there. Over the last decade now, we have been exploring Mars during a big scientific study of the shipwreck, together with lots of different partners. Lots of science being done there, and some years we have big resources and some years we have smaller resources. What's key to our exploration is that we don't depend on robots and high-tech equipment always. We use a lot of divers also. And my experience is that it's hard to exchange a diver with a robot. Both has its strengths, but a diver underwater is very important also. We work with lots of famous scientists and professors. This is Richard Lundgren, and he's the scientific director of the Mars project. So a normal diving day on Mars can look like this. You swim around and look at pretty cannons. And if you look at this cannon, it's a 48-pounder cannon. This one is like 7 tons of bronze, I think. And as you can see, the diver is small compared to the size of this cannon. But we don't only look at things, of course, we also study them and make a lot of measurements and so on. Later on, during this couple of days of Scuba.Digital presentation, Jared Jablonski will talk a little bit about the non-intrusive archaeology we do on Mars and so on, and he interviewed me, so you will learn more about photogrammetry and other things that we do on Mars also. So stay tuned for his upcoming presentation. Here you can see smaller cannons also, but you can also imagine how many artifacts you can find on Mars. If you take a warship like Vasa that sank during her maiden voyage, when she wasn't equipped for war, it's quite a big difference compared to if you explore a shipwreck that actually sank in the midst of battle, fully equipped for war and so on, fully pimped out, fully crewed, with all the supplies and everything needed. So here you can see surrounding this cannon, you can see not only that the cannon is still in its gun carriage, but you can also see lead rolls and other artifacts. The lead rolls was used to, you could use lead rolls to repair the hull side if it was leaking, but you can also, of course, make small gun musket balls and so on using the lead. So what about all of the people that was on board Mars? Well, we say that roughly 600 to 800 people follow Mars down to the sea bottom. And it's eerie because it's very hard to find them down there, the remains of these human beings. Archaeology is all about putting context to things, but also put human beings on the actual site. If you have a site with no human beings, it's hard to tell the story correctly. So to find the human beings on board is also, of course, very important to be able to tell the full story. We have found some of them and remains of them, and all of them speak a gruesome language and tells a gruesome story where violence, the ending was violent. You can see chopped off bone and so on. But what's eerie is that we can't find 800 of them. We have only found 2 or 3 of them. So where are they? And that's a question that we're trying to find out. We have theories and so on, but we still, when you have a theory, that leads to science, but you have to prove that science also. But lots of artifacts speaking about life on board during the last couple of hours on board and so on. So it's the wreck site on itself is like 50 times 50 meters, so like a football field. That's very interesting to see. When you start to dive and explore Mars, you spend a couple of years just looking at that, all the timbers, cannons, and so on. But then you start to look outside that, and then you see huge areas surrounding Mars with lots of artifacts that fell off the boat when she exploded and fell off the boat when she was sinking and so on. So a lot of artifacts is in surrounding areas, and that's where we're working right now, up to 70 meters away from the actual wreck site. And we are creating a digital map, georeference, which all of the artifacts we find is georeferenced with a geological reference point, so we know exactly where they are. Some things we find, we don't really know what it is. We believe that this is a small hand grenade, actually. That's what the scientists are saying. So it's hard to say, but you find a lot of surprises. What this is more simple to understand. This is one of the silver coins on board Mars, and there might have been up to 200,000 of these silver coins, special minted for this actual expedition. Mars was trying to break through the Danish and the Libyan armada to reach other city-states in Germany and rent a mercenary army. That's why they had a war treasure on board. And that didn't work out well, so the war treasure is on the bottom of the sea now. So that tells a special story also. And our current king in Sweden, he visited wreck sites and visited the project site a couple of years ago, and we were able to compare his current coin with his image on the current coin with the old Eric XIV's coin. And I must say that Eric XIV had a much cooler text on his coin. It said, "God gives to who he wants," instead of the current king who says something more politically correct, like, "Yeah, the future is yours," or something like that. And here you can see some of every day when you come back to port after a successful diving day, we spend a lot of time looking at the data that we have gathered together with the scientists, and we're kind of building up and understanding an archive, and we work a lot with photogrammetry and so on. The Mars project this year we had to cancel, sadly, the Mars project. But next year, 2021, will be a huge effort. So whatever we couldn't do this year due to the pandemic, we will double our efforts 2021. So please stay tuned and visit our wreck site, the marsproject.org, to see future events and what's going to happen down there, because it's going to be remarkable next year, I promise. And from all of us Martians, we would like to thank you for spending half an hour with us during this presentation, and hope you enjoyed it. I know that was kind of quick. 30 minutes is not much, but I wanted to take you through that history and that journey that we took discovering the wreck. And I also want to encourage you, if you want to do something, don't let people tell you that it's impossible. the more they tell you it's impossible, the more time and focus you should have actually doing the impossible. So thank you all, and have a wonderful day, and take care.